All right, looking at this idea of a secularist worldview and how that it's engulfed the society around us, has engulfed the United States. Um, Anti-God elements have been acting very aggressively. They've always been there. Sometimes I think when we, in our minds, think back to the founding of this country, the pilgrims who came over, sometimes we get a misunderstanding about everybody being a believer in God. Everybody was not a believer in God. Now, there was a large element of people who came over as a result of religious persecution. They wanted religious freedom. But there were people at the beginning of our country who were atheists, who were agnostic, who were what's called deists. There's plenty of different varieties of beliefs, but they were in the minority and they were not very aggressive. The larger portion of the people who were here at the beginning did believe in God, whether they were active in their particular religious group or whether they just simply believed in God and believed the Bible to some point and the principles of the Bible. That was a widespread conviction. Though some people said, well, all these things are discoverable just through natural means. We just observe, we just live, we just experience. And so it's really not anything different than what's in the Bible. But it was a good culture, a healthy culture for the most part. That has, of course, radically changed in our time, but it's not just in the past 10 years, not just in the past 20 years. We're talking about the past 150 years that people who do not believe in God, deny God, have been working very, very diligently, methodically, and patiently to get into the institutions of our nation, whether that's educational institutions or that's political institutions, it's organizations, media organizations, and also religious organizations. And they have infiltrated to the point now we're seeing the fruits very, very clearly. But all those things have been there for a very long time. If you just look back through time, you can see it clearly now. One of the things that the workbook brought up was, the Ball State University professor who taught a course on intelligent design, that there was a complaint that went out. The Freedom from Religion Foundation, I think it was, filed a complaint with the university. The university got scared and they told him you can't teach intelligent design any longer. Then you have the Colorado baker. That one, I remember when all that hit the news, and he refused to bake a cake for a homosexual couple that was getting, quote, married. And of course, they made a big deal out of it. And in fact, I personally think it was all a setup from the beginning. They went in, they were looking for somebody to make a test case out of. And that guy, he went through the ringer. But he was sued over refusing to do that. There's also a case where an Air Force, a member of the United States Air Force, he had been in for 19 years. And I forget how the issue came up, but the issue came up under his command, if you will. There were people under him, that there was an issue about homosexuality that came up. And he was called in to talk to his commander. And his commander asked him point blank, what is your view on homosexuality and homosexual marriage? And he told his commander, and his commander said, that's not compatible with Air Force policy. And he ended up being kicked out of the Air Force for that. So there's been a persecution, and that was, a private conversation. So it's almost as if the message is being sent, you can't hold a private conviction. Regardless of what the policy is, you can't have the conviction. And I think we see that creeping more and more into our society, and how that is a true threat to people who have believed in and what the country has practiced, freedom of religion, not freedom from religion, but freedom of religion. I have the right to my own personal conscience. You may not like it, but that's just too bad. So humanism, which is the driving engine behind all of this, has been on the rise for decades, as we said before. And their view is that all religions are equally good and equally bad. If there's any good, they're all equally good. If there's any bad, they're all equally bad. And so question number 1 asks this: list some changes in American life that reflect a change in worldview in our society. So what do you see in the world around us that reflects this shift from a generally God-believing, Bible-agreeing principles, what we might call a Judeo-Christian ethic, to this humanist, secularist worldview around us? Abortion. What about abortion? Okay. When I was born, when a few others of us were born, it was illegal across the board in this nation to get an abortion. But a few years after I was born, the Supreme Court case went up, and Roe v. Wade, you remember that, it legalized abortion. Now, we had this case here a couple of years ago where they overturned that, but abortion is still being done, being performed on a state-by-state basis in various degrees and things like that. So there was a shift, because it used to be universally against the law. Not that it wasn't done, but it was at least against the law. So that's changed. And what does that essentially get down to, by the way? Okay. It gets down to, do you view the baby as a human life, and then do you view that life as valuable, unique, and precious? And the answer to that is no and or no. But now more and more, what I've seen is people agree, yes, that's a human life, but it doesn't matter. Just, she doesn't want it. Just get rid of it. Right. Right. So, inconsistency.
Yeah, it's all about what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Because those same women that are screaming that it's their body, they should be able to do what they want. If they were pregnant and somebody caused an accident or something that made them lose their baby, then they want them charged with manslaughter.
Exactly. Exactly right. Now, one of the places we can look into the Bible just very quickly regarding this issue, when you go to Luke chapter 2, and it talks about there Jesus, of course, being born, and there's a reference to him. It talks about verse 5, Mary was with child. And let me see if I can find it here real quick. Verse 12, Luke 2, verse 12, the angel speaking to the shepherds says, and this will be a sign to you, you will find a babe wrapped in swaddling cloths lying in a manger. That word babe is the same word babe. So the babe that is born is the same word babe that is used to refer to John when he's in the womb, earlier in Luke chapter 1. So The Bible does not make a distinction between a baby in the womb and a baby who's been born. Okay, any other thoughts there? What other changes have we seen? Okay. So, where was the family established? In the garden, right? Adam and Eve are brought together. Eve was made for Adam, husband and wife. They're joined together. Father and mother, man should leave father and mother and cleave to his wife, cling to his wife. And that was good. God recognized this is good for man. It was for our benefit. He intended for there to be what's sometimes called a nuclear family, a father and a mother and their children, and they're raising those children, they're disciplining those children, they're teaching their children, they're loving and caring for those children. That's God's intention because that's what's good. But the family has been undermined, and one of the worst things that's undermined the family is welfare, because it gets rid of the need for a man to be there going out and working and the wife taking care of the home and the children. It is utterly gutted, especially in the poorer communities where they just, that's the answer. And let me have another baby and I can get more money. But there are many, many things. The whole entertainment industry is anti-family. Any other thoughts? Exactly. Yeah. They have absolutely destroyed the concept of marriage being something sacred and to be held in high esteem and to be held in honor before God. And they've done that, as you mentioned, in many, many different ways. Carrie. Okay. So if you just think back in a good deal of us in our lifetime, that feminizing of men has been taking place a very long time. And now we see where it's gotten to the point, not only feminizing the man, but then saying that man is actually a woman. It's reached a point of absurdity, but there are lunatics out there that actually believe it. And more than I think we would realize, more people accept it. Well, yeah, it's totally fine. But there's another underlying issue in that as well. Was there something else, Anita, and then Elijah? Right. Treading into tricky waters here, but with both these issues, the reality of the way God has made the world and made men and women is going to triumph. It's going to happen. Now I know we're running through crazy times, but you can't go against the way God made things and succeed. You can make a wreck of it, but you cannot succeed. And things have a way of, reality has a way of asserting itself over time. Elijah. Right, right. They put negative connotations on the traditional role of a woman and what the Bible would highlight as her glory and her qualities and what makes her unique and valuable in the home and among God's people. Philip?
First thing we talked about was abortion. Spin off of that. Just the devaluation of human life in general. Humanists would have us believe that we're nothing more than animals, and anymore that's how it's treated. I mean, if you look at the big cities in this country, I mean, there was another murder, there's 5 more people dead there. I mean, honestly, if you listen to the news enough, we don't talk to you because it's just so bad.
Right, right. Yes, there is the devaluing of human life that then you see the result of violence. And we read about that in the days of Noah. The earth was filled with violence, and it seems like that's what's happening with us today, that level of evil.
Denominationalism, so kind of stepping off the sexual issues, it's the religious issues. Everything's accepted from the sexual issues to the religious issues. You can be whatever you want, and you can change that belief, no problem. Churches that we talked about this last week that used to take a stand for things now don't because they want to be accepting and intolerant, and Paul speaks against the attitude in 1 Corinthians 5 about the man who had his father's wife. You guys are proud of your abundant love for this person, but you're not doing what's necessary, standing against sin, all that kind of stuff. So dominationalism and religious flexibility has created issues as well.
Well, and to me also, the decline in church attendance. Now, granted, we have all types of religious institutions that are in error, have been in error since their very founding. But there's something to be said that there were people who were religiously minded. They at least said there's a God, there's a Bible, we need to worship God, we need to serve God. There was some type of underlying concept there. Well, that's almost gone because churches, their attendance has gone way down, especially COVID destroyed it. It was absolutely evil and wicked, and Satan was behind all of that. And that's why you see these churches offering all these other things. We got to figure out how to get people in here.
We're seeing it kind of belong back into what Paul would have been after the start. Everything's kind of accepted.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we have to kind of be able to understand that that's where the change is, that maybe this is where the new fight is, and arm ourselves with it. And, it's the reason the way that Paul did it. Wherever else.
Right. Right. As we touched on last week, most people in the denominations don't even have a concept of the creeds that were behind their unique beliefs and practices, names, and all of that. And so when we try to talk to them about that, it kind of just goes by them. But they see these issues, and we confront these more and more in our modern world. So let's jump to question number 2 there, which really just goes through that list of things, list of topics and issues. And thinking about the first one there, God, humanist. And when I'm using the term humanist, I'm using it in the sense of a secular humanist, naturalist, those kinds of things, like a Charles Darwin kind of person. But they say, as non-theist, we begin with humans, not God, nature, not deity. Well, what about that idea of denying that there is a God, that there is a divine being that brought the universe into existence? What's the answer to that?
Well, first of all, if they're saying, if they're, making nature an example, then they totally ignore Romans 1.
Thank you. Romans 1, let's go over there. It's exactly what I thought of. Romans 1, and let's read verses 20 through 23. 3. Who will volunteer? Romans 1, 20 to 23. Charles, you got that?
Besides the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like the corruptible man, and birds, and four-footed animals, and creeping things.
Okay. So what is it, as Linda mentioned, what is it these people are ignoring?
They're ignoring the fact that there is order and complexity in nature that cannot be there without a design. You can't get order out of chaos. It's impossible.
Okay. They go against what science says are fundamental laws. So yeah, his invisible attributes have been clearly seen since the beginning of creation. Since man has walked this earth, since Adam and Eve have been here, you can just look in this universe and know there's a God. There's no other way that this gets here other than there is a God. And I would argue an honest look at all that we know now, you have to deny reality and fact. But of course that's happening everywhere. But the more we know, the more proof there is for God, the existence of God. Any other thoughts on that? Mike and then Linda. What was that catalyst? Even if you do believe in, right.
Well, I remember years ago, I saw a thing on the History Channel. It was talking about the universe. And this narrator was saying, isn't it amazing that the planets are all where they are in perfect alignment? And it's giving credit to like the Big Bang or something, you know? And it was saying flat out, if they were just a millimeter different or something, they would collide. That it can recognize that, and yet they just and go
Right.
right past the fact that it had to be made.
Yeah.
I couldn't watch it. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I'd seen, I don't know if it was a month or 2 months ago, but I'd seen a little blurb that stated that more and more scientists in the scientific community are giving up the argument of macroevolution and things, because as they're looking at the universe, they're realizing there's way too much order here for us to say it's just by chance. Now, they're not going to the point of saying there is a divine being behind all of it that we need to worship, but they're saying there's too much order here for it to be all by chance.
And there's no proof that one species evolved into another.
Right.
Microevolution, yeah, see that within a species.
Can see changes, right? Yeah.
But not one to another.
Exactly. All right. So this next one, origin. On the question of origin, humanists say the universe is an accident. One of the quotes there is, our universe is simply one of those things which happens from time to time. And we just touched on this. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 4 says what? Hebrews 3, verse 4. I would highly recommend you memorize, or at least memorize or paraphrase the idea that's in here. This is a really good passage. Hebrews 3, verse 4. Go, Philip.
For every
Yeah, it's just utterly undeniable. A fundamental law. That will never change. Anything that has been built, somebody built it. You look at, let's just take a log cabin. You look at that, you walk up in the woods and say it was built 200 years ago by pioneers that went out there and built it, and it's all dilapidated. And you see the roof falling in and one wall down and vines growing up on it. You're not an idiot. You know somebody built that at some time. And the universe is infinitely more complex. You just take one cell. They're still trying to figure out, how does that thing work? We don't get it. We've seen all this, and you could have a stack of books as high as the ceiling explaining cells, and they still don't have it.
Along this idea of the housing example given, if we look at a housing development and we see these homes that are replicated one right after another, do we think that the first home resulted in all the others through spontaneous evolution?
Right. Yeah. A big tornado came through and took all the woods around and duplicated. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody knows that's not so. It's just. All right. So humanists believe man is a random development of billions of years of evolution, a descendant of cellular blob that inexplicably formed from non-life. That's my definition of how they view it. Humanism believes that man is a part of nature and that he has emerged as a result of a continuous process. That's from the Humanist Manifesto 1. Of course, where did man come from? Very simple. God made man. All right, very simple. Man is so radically different than animals, okay? If you just look at that, there is no animal that is out there building cities. Well, ants build these little mounds. Yeah, but they're not building skyscrapers, and they're not building roads and highways, and they're doing things as automatons, just as they're programmed to do, not creating new programs. So it's just utterly ridiculous to think that man came from any other place than a higher, more powerful being that put them into place and programmed their genes, if you will. All right, how about thought? This is one I want us to think about a minute. Humanists believe human thought is the product of the chance collision of molecules. So what about that idea of thought? I kind of jumped the gun, by the way. Mike. Okay, let's go to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. I would like us to read verses 19 to 21 and just notice what Solomon states here relative to man and animals. So Ecclesiastes 3, verses 19 through 21. Who will read that for us? Mike.
For the fate of the sons of men and the fate of beasts is the same. As one dies, so the other dies. Indeed, they all have the same breath, and there is no advantage for man over beast, for all is vanity. All go down to the same place, all come from the dust, and all return to the dust. Who knows what the breath of man sends upward, and the breath of beast sends downward from?
Okay, so he's pointing out that you've got this fleshly element of man and beast. In the fleshly element of man and beast, there's one end, and that's the grave, the going back to the ground, returning to the dust. But on this other part, there's something different. and he puts it here in a question in verse 21, the spirit of the sons of men which goes upward, who knows that spirit? It goes upward. And who knows the spirit of the animal which goes down to the earth? So he's asking about who knows about the spirit. There's one that goes up, there's one that goes down. When you go into the last chapter, Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 7, remember that then the dust will turn to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. And there, of course, he's referring to man. And what he's saying is, this spirit of the animal, so to speak, goes to the earth the same place as the body goes. In other words, it's gone. That body decays, it's gone. The spirit of the animal, whatever was there, is not there anymore. But the spirit of man, something else that happens with it. So there's a great distinction between man and beast.
I don't have my Bible open, but isn't it earlier in chapter 3, verse 9 or verse 11, where God says, for Solomon wrote that God has set eternity in the heart of man? So he's making a distinction there too. There's an eternal awareness that, as Mike put it, moral innateness. There's an eternal sense that we have that animals don't. So he's kind of making that argument throughout much of chapter 3.
Okay, yes, he is.
Which lines up with Acts 17 about seeking God while he may be found. There's just like this automatic, we are programmed to seek and ask those questions. Animals.
Okay, cite me a difference in man and animal along those lines. The idea of us seeking, animals don't. Is there a church of the red ants? No, doesn't exist. Elephants are not gathering out on the savannah and having a worship of either idols or the one true God. They just don't. Why is that? Have monkeys ever built a telescope? Animals, like you say, they don't think like that. Now they have some type of thinking, but it's just the immediate, it's the here, it's instinctive, it's not contemplative, it's not reflecting. Animals don't have libraries, they don't write histories, they don't get together and have discussions about philosophy and morals and what's the right thing to do. And here's our laws. It doesn't exist. We are so far and away. I remember growing up there for a while, there was a lot of chatter about how dolphins and whales are more intelligent than men. Does anybody else remember that? And as a kid, I thought that's pretty neat. Wow, those dolphins. But as an adult, I wonder about the intelligence of the person who ever put that out. I mean, seriously. I mean, what are you thinking?
It's just, I don't know where they were coming from with that, but I think in essence, what they really were saying was they're more trainable. And they didn't expect that, So
Yeah.
they must be so broad.
Yeah, killer whales were more trainable, and that's why they kill people, right? Where they're the most highly trained they've ever been in their life at SeaWorld. And,
Take this, they put some sonar thing on them.
yeah.
And we can train them to go here, there,
Right.
somewhere
Go
else.
find a bomb.
Yeah, and so going, oh great, they must be really smart. I'm going,
Yeah.
that's like thinking your dog can
Well, mine would be better, I'll tell you that. We can edit the tape. But yes, we laugh at this as being absurd. But the thing is, people genuinely, truly believe this. And so you think about how it was for Paul, for Peter, for John, going out into a paganistic world, because that's what we're doing right now. We're facing a paganistic world, because you have, Elijah, the prophet, back in 1 Kings chapter 18, when those prophets of Baal were there jumping and shouting and cutting themselves, and he just needled them mercilessly. You need it a little louder. Maybe he's asleep. Maybe he's on a journey. Just because it was absurd that they were calling out to Baal. Just like this is absurd to us. Now, we have to use wisdom and judgment about talking to people, but quite frankly, there are some people that deserve just utter mocking. This is ridiculous. You cannot be serious about this. So we need to understand we're not the first to face this. It's kind of new in our generation for many of us. How can people ever believe that? But it's rather prominent around us. Other thoughts before we jump to the next one, Zach, then Andrew.
Animals don't have funerals. They don't consider death. They don't understand what that is. Animal can die. That's part of some group of animals, like a herd or whatever. They'll just walk on. It doesn't cross their mind because they don't have minds, and that's just another, term that we use loosely. But they don't consider death. They don't celebrate life.
Yeah, Andrew.
Versus it compared to snake, which is very crafty. There's a difference between that and anything, think machine together or have, higher functions.
Build a rocket ship. Okay, I'll be impressed when animals get together and build a rocket ship. Until then, all these other things, the neat little things, but the things that the animals do are for us to behold and to hold in wonder and awe that God made them, that they could do these things, whether it's ants and what they do, or bumblebees or whatever. It's amazing how they function in this world. But that's different than them exceeding those kinds of things, going beyond that. All right, so Mike mentioned this a minute ago, the idea of a will. The Bible says that we have a soul, we have a mind, that we make choices, and we are accountable for those choices. Choose you this day whom you will serve. Joshua 24:15. In 2 Corinthians 5, verse 10, it says, we're all going to give an account for the deeds we've done in the body, whether good or bad. We're going to be held accountable for the choices we make, because we have a free will to make those decisions. Animals are not like that. They don't have a will in that way. They act instinctively. Now, there are times when we as humans hold them accountable, and rightly so, that if an animal kills a human being, that animal needs to be put down. We get that. We understand that. But the animals don't get together and hold court and say, Simba over here ate the gazelle. We got to do something about that. It's just, or Simba killed the little cub lions, and we got to do something about that. It is what it is. All right, so history. Humanists do not see a purpose in history, just circumstantial random events. Our understanding of history, according to them, is the idea simply our biases as we look back through time. What does the Bible teach about history? Okay. God's hand is in it. In what way, Mike? Let's all turn to Daniel chapter 2, by the way. What is Why is God's hand in history?
It's so that we spend eternity with Him. He's guiding us to where we need to go.
Exactly. He had a plan before he ever created the world. Here's what I'm going to do. And when the world was created, Adam and Eve sinned, it goes into effect. And he began to work that plan out. And the Old Testament gives us that detail of that working out of that plan. It doesn't give us details of the history of the world and every nation and every event that unfolded and took place in ancient times. And, here's the theory of gravity and relativity and all those kinds of things. It's like God created man, man became evil, judgment. Man begins to grow again, and he picks out Abraham. And Abraham had this son Isaac, and Isaac had Jacob, and Jacob had all these sons, and they became the 12 tribes. And those 12 tribes did this and that and the other, and boom, here comes Jesus out of one of those tribes, the Savior of the world. Gives us all of that going down through. So, in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 37 beginning, we're not going to be able to read this, but Daniel 2:37 to 45, this is Daniel interpreting the dream of Nebuchadnezzar about history before it happens. And remember, he said, this image you saw with the gold, the silver, the bronze, then the iron, the clay, these are 4 kingdoms. You're the first kingdom. There's another kingdom coming after you that's inferior. And then there's another one after that that's inferior to that. There's another one after that that's inferior to that, but it's stronger. And it's mighty, it's powerful. In the days of those kings, the 4th kingdom, the Roman Empire, God would establish his kingdom. So he's saying, God, as Mike said, God's hand is in history working all this out. It's not accident. It's not happenstance. It's not random. God is working these things out, even with the free will of man. And that shows you the great power, the might, the knowledge of God. Clint.
Suddenly did them, and they came to pass. Verse 5 says, I declared them to you from of old, before they came to pass, I announced them to you, lest you should say, my idol did them, my carved image, my metal image commanded me. So if you read through that passage, first 11 verses there, it really talks about how I created the universe, and you are perverting.
Mm-hmm. Right. And there's things he's known from the beginning, and he has revealed because he's God. And he's unfolded all that in history.
Wasn't there a saying, that if you, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but, if you refuse to listen to history or even to repeat it,
Mm-hmm.
we learn from it. Just like the Bible says, we learn from the Old Testament. That we look back at those things, and that brings us to Christ. And like Judah should have learned from Israel's being taken into captivity.
Mm-hmm.
What did they do?
Yeah. Didn't you see your sister? What happened to her? Yeah.
That definitely has a purpose.
Exactly. So one of the places, if you want to chase this a little more, one of the ones that stands out to me, Genesis chapter 14, Abraham meeting Melchizedek, and how that plays into the coming of the Messiah and him being in the priesthood of Melchizedek. That to me is God's hand in history. Maybe more so than any other thing for me. It's just very impressive how that's all put in there and how it unfolds 2,000 years later in Jesus Christ. So the Bible, according to humanists, is what? An invention of man. It's Hebrews, it's their myths, it's their legends, it's their own idyllic view of their history and their biases to make themselves look great and good and all of that. What is the Bible? Okay, 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. All scripture is given by inspiration, right? It's God-breathed, it's God-given. What are some of the things you could think of that points to the fact that the Bible is not from man, not the product of human will, and cannot be the product of human will? Is there anything you think of, Clint? Prophecies, right? You know, the skeptics are always trying to go in and say, well, this was written much later than what it appears because there's no way they could have known about that detail. And then there's more evidence and more things come out. Oh, yeah, it actually was written. And so how do we explain that? Yeah, prophecy, huge thing showing the inspiration of the scripture. Anything else? That histories.
200 years ago, you had a bunch of people saying the Bible couldn't be right. There's no such thing as the Hittites.
Right.
You have whole degrees talking about nothing but it.
Exactly right. All those details in there that were lost to the common knowledge of humanity and then rediscovered that the Bible had all along. Very good.
For a book of this size, the time of the span of time it covers, how many authors, different languages, different regions, for there to be
Over 1,400 years. Go ahead.
for there to be textual alignment and no contradictions, though there's arguments made to try to point out contradictions, they're all explainable. And then the preservation of that text over periods of time and all the criticism that it has to go through to be legitimized, and it passes that test.
Yeah. Written over 1,400 plus years by 40 plus authors, different times, different nations, different perspectives on things. You know, they had different cultures, if you will, to some degrees all through those years. And yet they have this harmonious message in spite of the negative comments about it. It's a harmonious message. It couldn't be. Yeah. Carrie. Yeah, paths of the ocean, like the Gulf Stream. Yeah, literally discovered because a man's son read that to him in the Psalms. He said, I'm going to go find him, and he found him. Matthew Fontaine, I think was his name. Yeah, one blood, all nations of men by one blood. Life is in the blood, the spherical earth. All those things are in the Word of God. So yes, all right. So let's move on to lesson number 3 next week. Thank y'all.